So the goal is really just to have a series of conversations together, address our shared understanding, bring you up to speed, and certainly I do not believe that all constituencies across the campus are on the same informational level. So the board has been very involved in this over a period, the last 2 years. The cabinet has been very involved, depending on your administrative position or leadership position and faculty. So Amanda's pretty fine-tuned to this, and Faye a bit this year, you know. But what I'll just say is the rank and file of most of us out here just get little bits and pieces. So the goal is to bring us all up to speed, get questions, and talk about this in a way that's hopefully informative. Okay, how we got here. 2002, there was a Measure N, which was I think the most recent bond for the college. It was passed and it funded construction of what we're seeing now on this campus, a little bit of Upper Valley campus and a little bit of the South Valley campus, which you may not know that term, but it's American Canyon High School. We own some property, some buildings on that property as well. So really those things. And then subsequent general obligations bonds failed to meet the 55% marker. Level of support in 2008, I think, was about 53 or 4, somewhere in there. And in 2014, we missed it just by a nose. It was a couple hundred votes, I think. There was a post-election, June 2015 survey. Carolee's got it in her hand, and it looks like that, and it was done by Godby Research. What we wanted to find out was, okay, if we've really not passed these bonds, why not? What's going on? And it really came out pretty clear. Too rushed. The last bond was too rushed. These were the results from the survey in the community and what their observation was. We needed more focus. The story really about what we were trying to accomplish in the community wasn't that focused. So there was a lot of refocus, or a lot of items that were not really relevant about the bond that appeared in the newspapers. So we didn't make the case, in essence. Communication needed to start earlier. This is what that report said. Start your communication early, a couple years before, which we have. And then details. So some of the pieces that were really not present in the 2014, and I think the 2008 as well, were really detailed matrices of, correct, English majors out there? Correct details of exactly what are you going to do? What's this include? So we had a draft FMP last time, facilities master plan. So a lot of that was open. And then the board reaffirmed the needs. This is in June. The needs of the college. In other words, the need of the college was, I think, understood across the campus. Where we didn't really make the case was for a bond to support those needs. So those needs were reaffirmed by the board in June of 15, and we started talking at that June meeting about a potential bond in 2018. Felt like a long time ago, and here we are in 2018. It comes up fast. And then August of 15, which is that same time frame to now, we've finished the EMP and the updates, the facilities, educational master plan, for those of you who may not know, the facilities master plan, and the work kind of continues on those as we're moving forward. And the technology plan you'll hear a little bit about today, and some other plans. So we've done our work and our background really on completing the planning that was one of the big stumbling blocks of the last community communication. And then the community support survey, which is happening this month, has been out there. The board authorized a community support survey. Find out what the community believes that are the strengths of the college, and what do they want if they were to pass a bond measure. What things would they encourage us to do with that money? And that's out there as well. That analysis is ongoing, and we'll have debriefs in the next couple weeks on what that looks like. Okay, so that's how we got here. For those of you who don't know what this is, I'm going to just do this really one bullet at a time. It's a general obligation bond. It's constitutionally authorized in California. It can only be for capital improvements, buildings, and then the stuff that goes in the buildings. No operations, no ongoing maintenance. Help me, Bob, if I'm misstating, but so those things to instructional services or instruction themselves. 55% voter approval, which is a reasonable target. You know, some of the bond measures, different kinds of bond measures, require a 2/3. It issues a specified amount in bonds. You have to go out for a very specific amount. You have to make sure that only those are property taxes, so it really just is a property tax initiative that goes out. And the legal maximums are $25 per $100,000 of assessed valuation. So in counties like ours where houses are assessed, you know, at massive values, you have the ability to go out for more money than you would in a county where the houses are, you have a low population and the houses are not assessed at that great a level. Yeah, all okay on that? 2/3 of the board must approve the resolution ordering the election. There has to be a project list of what you're going out for. This has got to appear out there. It's also got to be ballot language, and then the bond size. You have to have it very specific of what you're going to go out for. So outside of that, that's the general bond. Facilities master plan is the next piece here, and Bob and Matt are going to talk about what's in the facilities master plan that we can understand.
How many of you have looked at the facilities master plan that's on the college website? Very good, quite a few of you. So those that haven't, I encourage you to go to the facilities webpage at the facilities page of the college website, and down on the left-hand side, you'll see the facilities master plan. What we tried to do with the facilities master plan, the version that was approved by the board in, I believe it was March, was to take a look at the updated educational master plan, look at what the needs were of the college, and come up with a facilities plan that best met those needs at that point in time. Part of that was looking backwards to what we had from previous facilities master plans, but also looking at that new data as we move forward. Basically, what we've identified, the need for 4 new buildings to address what our needs are. Those would be Building 200, which would be at the north end of the campus, and they're the blue buildings that you can see on there. So Building 200 is the north end of the campus up by the PAC. Building 900 is shown in this version is an infill building in the quad for additional student affairs, student services space. And then we have a new science building for physical science to replace the chemistry, engineering, geology, physics, and astronomy. I'll leave somebody out, but and then some additional buildings down at the south end of campus for viticulture. So additional wine lab space as well as replace the ag lab. You can see the salmon colored buildings. Those are all buildings that are slated for some level of renovation. So anywhere from the gymnasium, there's a phase 2 on the first floor. 1,000 building and 800 building, get some renovation there. And then through where the existing bookstore is, financial aid, existing student activity center, all receives facelift and renovation as part of the student affairs modifications. The 1800 building would be completely renovated once there was a new physical science building. That could be renovated to house general classrooms, or it could be a new home for MESA and STEM programs that could be associated with the science areas. Upgrades and renovation to the 1600 and the 1400, again, the general classrooms. The 1200 building, which is the little theater. Some decisions have to be ultimately made there on whether we need secondary performing space or is it going to truly be large lecture space. If that's the case, it needs to have some renovations done. The machine tool welding has been a long-standing project that needs to be modernized and some needs addressed there. And then down on the south end of campus, we've got some additional renovations, a phase 2 in the visual arts building, and graphic design, the additional things. One of the things that I did want to go back and talk about is Building 200, which again is slated as a new instructional building. What we're trying to do there is address the need that we have for large classrooms and flexible instructional space so that we can have classrooms that hold 50, 75, but they can also be broken down into classrooms that can hold 35 students. The other piece of that is ultimately, if you can see on the map where we've located the physical sciences building, that is where the modular buildings are right now. And those are large format classrooms that hold a lot of students. So Building 200 would replace that need short term that would allow us to build the new physical science building there. The middle of the mall, the central walkway that runs down the campus, anybody that's walked down there can see that the trees have been doing their work and pitching the sidewalk and things. That's actually quite a large project to replace the trees, planter box walkways, lights, irrigation, and do a lot of work down the middle of the campus. And then we also have the central walkway from the bus stop up through the middle of campus that way. We also have infrastructure issues and challenges with, we need to extend some fiber optics so that we have some better IT infrastructure on campus. We also have issues that we're going to need to address related to storm pipe, water pipes, and sanitary sewer. Not very spectacular things to talk about, but when you have 55-year-old pipes, those are things you need to address. As far as next steps, one of the things that we've been working on is we can put together a list that has these items on here, but what does it cost? That's part of the phase where we're in right now. So we've been working for a period of time to try to drill down and get estimates and to see what those things, what those costs are. There's a lot of different tools that we can use, but with inflation, time of the bond, if there's a project that's on here, and let's say the funding isn't available for that particular project for 10 years, there's going to be cost escalation, but there's also going to be program changes that are going to affect what we need in that space. To that end, through the process of developing this document, we had a lot of focus group meetings with different targeted folks on campus. The last of those meetings took place in 2016 in the spring. Well, we're going to go back and check our assumptions that we made on those for a couple of those buildings in particular. So in the next month or so, in fact on September 13th, I just today scheduled a meeting with Oscar to meet with the Student Affairs group to go over the Student Affairs facilities to confirm what it is that they need as we move forward. So that could change some of the pieces and parts of that as we look at their secondary issues where people move and where they reside, but it all goes back to square footage and how much they need for their program. The other one that I'm trying to work on is another revisiting of the physical science building with the faculty, now that the faculty are back on site, and they have the first week of the semester under their belt. So we're going to schedule, and again, make sure that we've made correct assumptions and things haven't changed, and then what we'll do is we'll refine those budget numbers again and see if that changes the scope of anything else that we've got in there so that we can come up with a more accurate assessment of those costs, because ultimately one of the key pieces that builds the bond project list is extracted from the facilities master plan. There are other sources, but that's one of the places.
So just want to say a few words about the technology plan. So we've been working on the technology plan. The technology committee has been working on the technology plan for the past year. We presented information about the draft of the technology plan to the Administrative and Confidential Senate, the Academic Senate, and the Classified Senate before the end of the spring semester. We will continue the work to finalize the technology plan within the next 2 months. One of the key elements of finalizing the technology plan is that we have, if you haven't heard, we recently hired a new director of institutional technology. His name is Eric Hoke, and he starts on September 5th. So he will be key to helping us finalize the technology plan. But one of the key elements as it relates to a bond measure that's in the technology plan is the need to upgrade our infrastructure on campus. And what we have in the technology plan is 3 phases to that infrastructure upgrade: to update the infrastructure in the data center itself, to upgrade fiber serving the campus, and Matt touched on that when he was talking about the facilities master plan, and then finally upgrading all of the switches throughout the campus. And our current estimate, based on what we believe we need to do in order to do that upgrade, is well over $1 million to do those upgrades. And so those are things that we would look to include in a potential bond measure as we move forward. And so once that technology plan is finalized, as I say, which will be happening in the next 2 months, then it'll be coming out to all of the constituent groups and ultimately going to the Board of Trustees for acceptance and approval. Then that number would be part of the bond list as we go forward for a bond measure.
On these next steps, you shouldn't read these as these are the next steps that we're taking. These are the next steps that you would take if we move forward on a bond. So we're still addressing feasibility. We're certainly talking, the board has certainly talked, and Mary Ann can take some of your questions, I think, if you will. In terms of 2018 has been the target since 2015, and we're eagerly kind of looking for now stakeholder input. Stakeholders last time didn't have enough time to really weigh in, to be really frank. I think that we were all just encouraged by the idea of what a bond could do in addressing the needs, so that was good, but it kind of was truncated. The whole process was truncated. So now we're slowing this process down. We're still, a year, away from whatever we might be talking about, and engaging stakeholders now, faculty teams, administrative teams, teams of interest, if you will. If there's an area that, in meeting with Matt or Bob or me, or that you'd really like to weigh in, if we were to go for a bond, I would be really interested in this is you saying this, in giving you my perspective on what it might include. Those are real key stakeholder pieces. The board and I discussed at length that, and I've done this publicly with you as well, without really the endorsement of your key stakeholders inside, faculty, staff, students, and administrators, it presents such an unclear message to the community, it's difficult. So we'll be asking for each of those units to think about and either analyze the pros and cons of it and come in with your analysis of whether you would support or not support that in the near future, and pretty close as you start to look at it. And that would be an important piece, I think, for the board in their deliberations to know that we are either behind this thing as a group or not. Is that fair enough? And let me see whether or not there's a lot more questions. We might be questions. These were some that were just, we can get to questions, but I can address some, right? Just a couple. Will any of the future bond measure be inflated to accomplish other objectives or projects not on the bond list? No, illegal to do that, right? It's got to be very specific in what you're going to use it for, and there's no hidden agenda here to try to build the whatever it might be. So it would be very clear about what we're going after and why we're going after it and the need there. What will the voters shoulder in dollar amounts? We really don't know. As I addressed before, there's a maximum amount that's legally that you can go after, and a minimum amount that would cover the costs of any improvements at a very minimum level. When the group decision, will the decision be made to go out for a bond? How will each group be involved in that decision? A lot of these kinds of meetings, these are just two. I'd like to go and speak to any small group, unit, department, division, senate, along with other folks, just to hear where you are at. And we're not rushing to any foregone conclusion, if you will. future bond be prioritized, again, through the same thing. What comes first? Matt just really addressed it. Some things need to come first because they're primary and secondary effects. You can't do everything, and you can't close the school down. And for those of you who've been here before or who have been at other colleges, when you do infrastructure, I mean, you have to think about parking, about where people will work as you're building new stuff. And I have been on a campus just recently on a visit, and they had so much work that you couldn't even find where the college was. I mean, it's very difficult. So you have to be very careful here. You don't shoot yourself in the foot with all of your brand new improvements. What are the instructional needs that will be addressed? We just talked about it. Those come instructional needs, faculty expertise. Faculty needs to be involved front and center on what is it that will best address the instructional solution for this. And then the other constituencies need to be involved where it's appropriate. So if it's I just saw Choi back there, but if it's an instructional need, media, or it's a infrastructure need, then other constituencies need to weigh in. So this is not done solely by some architect in an ivory tower, but what you're building really is applicable, practical, useful. And we're now community supported. Do we still need a facilities bond? Maybe Bob can address that. He did in another forum.
Sure. So first of all, what does community supported mean? Community supported means that when you look at what the state believes based on their cost per FTES, what they believe we need to operate the college, they look at 3 sources of revenue. They look at student enrollment fees, they look at local property taxes, and then if those fall short, then it would be money coming in from the state as a state appropriation. Community supported means you don't need any funds from the state because your local property taxes and your student enrollment fees cover what the state believes you need to operate the college. The benefits, there are a couple of benefits to being community supported. There are actually lots of benefits to being community supported, but the top 2 are that you're in a way insulated or protected from changes that happen in the state budget, so that if a decision is made 2 or 3 years from now that the state wants to redirect funds from the community college system and send it somewhere else, we are not, it impacts us very little when that happens. It could affect some of our categorical funding, but our basic funding for the college would not change. The other thing, which is the key benefit, is that any excess over and above what the state believes you need to operate the college, you get to keep. And so those local property taxes stay here. Now, I keep referring to us as a baby community supported district because at this point, the excess is about $150,000. So we're not going to be able to build a bunch of new buildings with $150,000. It's going to take us a while to get to where Marin is. Marin, I believe their excess property taxes are about $30 to $40 million, so over and above what they need. But even looking at the community supported districts, they're using that excess community support to improve the programs, to improve the supplies that are available in the classroom and to improve the instruction in the classrooms. They may use some of that excess to build buildings, but even those community supported districts that have much higher excess revenue than we do at this time have still gone out for general obligation bonds in order to do these major construction projects because it just is difficult to save up that amount of money in order to do those projects going forward. So you will see as you look at, and there are only a handful of community supported districts, but one of the community supported, the only, I should say, community supported district in San Diego County is Miracosta. Miracosta College, their property taxes are $40 million in excess of what they need. They just recently passed a general obligation bond measure to do construction on their campus as well.
we're going to go to questions, and I'm sure you might have some that are not addressed. I wanted to reintroduce Trustee Marianne Mancuso and welcome her. It's really important because this is primarily the board has to ratify and put this resolution on there. And Marianne, I don't know whether you care. Do you want to make a couple of comments or okay? And just kind of set the stage, and then there's two things that are happening, or three things today. This is a first of many of kind of these things. We're recording it so we can kind of get at the questions, and it's an opportunity for us to kind of learn together as we go. So here, I'll give it to you, and then we'll just go to Q&As right after that. Okay.
Okay, so I just want to really reiterate a couple of things that Ron has said, and one of those being how important the feedback from the constituent groups really is to us. It probably weighs, well, it does weigh higher than anything, because as we know, the last time we went out for a bond, that was front and center. It was just, there was no getting around it, that we weren't getting the full support internally. And so how do we go out to the community and get the support without the internal support? So while Ron says, these are kind of baby steps and we're moving along, at the same time, though, there's an awful lot we need to do to get out in the community and to make sure that the community understands, because I think what happened also the last time is that there was a communications breakdown. I think that there was the facilities plan was just, tossed around so much, and I think that we need to have the time to get that communication out to the community, but that's going to come from the support that we get internally. So, and the board is going to, really, that's going to weigh huge on our decision and how we move forward. So I'd love to see next Tuesday's group much larger than this as well, so that everybody feels that they've been included and that the conversation is inclusive, and you've had an opportunity to weigh in. So please, when you're talking to people, really encourage people to come into the room and be a part of the conversation and be at the table. So I think that's most important to the trustees.
The community survey looks at the general voter feelings about how the college is kind of doing in the community, their reflection of what's important. And so the questions that were asked in that survey will be presented in roll-up form. We don't receive as a work product from our surveyor a line item by line item by line item. It's not part of the contract yet, so we'll see whether we need to do that. But what they do is report to us. They already have, for example, one piece that I know is tracking high is community and technical education, career, jobs. The community is really interested in the college providing education for jobs. They really like that.
One thing I wanted to add is that in my role, I'm out in the community and I'm talking to people, and I don't know if you realize how high the expectations are of the community of this college. People expect so much from us. They expect so much to be offered out in the community, and for the college to really respond to their needs. So I think that it's really important that the community understands, for us to meet those needs, we have to work together, because so often it's we want. But then when it comes to finances, any type of funding whatsoever, we're not seeing them knocking on our door quite as much. So I think that there's a real important piece of the community's expectations and them understanding how we can meet those expectations. And, and the other thing that we want to stay away from as much as we possibly can is, and this is me saying this, which might seem odd to people, is that we want to keep it non-political. And so it's really about what we're going to be able to do to continue our student success. And it's not about an us and them or anything like that. So that is a very important piece. But I just wanted you to realize from being, again, on the inside, understanding how high the expectation is from the community, what's happening here at the college.
Well, there's a little bit of call to action. I mean, the call to action is really, we're all leaders, because the issue really at Napa Valley College is to create a leadership model where everybody's a leader. You lead from the middle, you lead from the top, wherever it might be. So I would encourage you to have conversations with other people in your unit or cross units, for sure. What do you think? Get ideas. The more that we have, the more discussion, the better. I mean, it's really important. At some point, we'll be asking officially for you to consider this in your senates, in your groups, classified students, and administrators and faculty. For either, it could be a straw vote, it could be an endorsement or non-endorsement, or it could be a motion of support or non-support. But those are going to be important, and being ambivalent or invisible is really not going to be helpful. So we're really looking for people just to weigh in as we go. So questions. Let's just address questions. The goal here is to kind of capture them, or comments, or ideas, or thoughts. Maybe any or all of those. Yeah, Gail.
We have 3 buildings at the high school?
We do. At the high school at American Canyon, we don't have 3 buildings. We have 1 building with 3 classrooms and an office. It's about $1 million complex in the middle of that. And our goal is to expand, which we are already, expand classes in there, which cuts down on some of the traffic. It's a beautiful facility and will help for some of our South County students moving in. But yeah, yes.
I think that the program they had to get the high school kids involved in our school gets them excited. It helps with the funding, I think, with this bond. I think that was a critical element that we took advantage of this year, I think, and that's really going to maybe help, and then having that center over there at the high school, I didn't know about that, and that's funneling the kids this way. That's a great idea. But I think, yeah, having a little feedback from the community, on how they get their kids out of their homes is critical. And I think once we, address that, we'll have more people on board.
I was just thinking about, you were saying that we won't have another bond for 20 years. And that got me thinking about stuff like, maybe we could be a showcase for innovation in terms of, energy savings and transportation changes and rising waters. Is the river going to flood us out? Things like that. So maybe we could be a source of innovation for the community, and maybe with our winery building show wineries things they could do. We could have water-wise landscaping and really, get the community behind us on things like that show that we're trying to be innovative.
I'll bring it over while I'm walking it over. Yeah, we've done, one of the things that impressed me when I got here was that the sustainability efforts that the college had done so much of already, and we could really take a leadership position there.
It's actually pretty easy. When do we pay off the 2002 bond? And what other bonds are we going to compete with?
First of all, we've already retired some of the 2002 bonds, and we still have some bonds out there, and we're looking at refinancing some of those bonds to reduce the interest rates and shorten the amount of time that those will be out there. So expect to hear a little more about that as we go forward over the next couple of months. In terms of what we'll be competing against, can't really say if anyone else in Napa County is going to be going out for a bond. Unified just passed one, so it certainly, there wouldn't be an expectation that they would be going. But the good news is that at least currently, and the bond analysts don't see any reason for this to change anytime soon, that investors, because of the security in general obligation bonds and municipal bonds, are very interested in purchasing municipal bonds and general obligation bonds. In fact, there's excess demand, there's not enough supply for them. And so the ability to sell the bonds and the interest rates for the bonds, if things stay the way they are right now, and no one can predict the future, but there's no reason to believe that there's going to be any significant change, that our ability to sell those bonds at a reasonable interest rate looks very good at this point.
Is there something that we can do that would get everybody in the community on board? No, no. I mean, the taxpayers have been real clear that they do not support and will not support any increment for any reason, regardless of the strategic initiative. So they've been real clear about that, and that's okay. You know, that's just a stance. So I think the frame really has to be about student success. I mean, this is not about taxes. This is about student success.
I do have one question. And it's sort of that transition from us talking about it to when the actual campaign begins, if the board decides to go forward with a campaign. When do you anticipate, and I may have just missed that in the beginning, but when is that transition, when are you planning for that to take place?
We're looking at, that's what the community survey was intended to do, was to gauge the reality of the college going out in the community and then the kind of voter support. So we've targeted 18, which, and there's two dates that came up. One was the June, what's that called? The June election. There's some name for that. Primaries. And then the other was the general election in November. And both of those present challenges and opportunities. You know, more folks show up in November, and we may be better served to wait for that larger group who would be more supportive, or we may, based on our knowledge and desires, decide to go out earlier. So that's still there. We'll wait for that. But we're really talking about 18 for sure in this round, sometime this year. We have addressed a couple things. November also gives us a little bit of longer runway, if you will, to prepare and work, and June might be an option as well as we move forward.
My preference is June.
Yeah.
If I could just, I think June is a better time for us because, and that's why the quicker we can get input and feedback, because it's less distracting. With, trustees running for re-election and the bond becoming the focal point of something like that, and all of the other elections that take place during that time, I think that it would help us a great deal to really be able to be front and center, kind of without so much going on, because then at some point people get a little overwhelmed with everything that they have to vote for. So I would just love to see as much input and feedback as we could, so that we do have a good runway, say by the first of the year, to really hit a campaign full force.
So if the bond passes, what are we looking at time we put a shovel in the ground?
Between now and then, we have ongoing conversations about sequencing and other things. So the facilities committee for the last year has been talking about different scenarios as far as sequencing, and we think we have a pretty good scenario for that. But ultimately, it's going to take, before you can do construction drawings and things to move forward, you got to have money to do that. So 6 months to a year probably before one of the a major building was worked on. But the other thing that was shown there, and again I encourage you to look at the facilities master plan online, there are a whole lot of classroom upgrades, infrastructure kinds of things, and there are many of those projects that can be geared up and ready to go and be started pretty quickly. The other thing too is there's the physical process of actually going out and selling the bonds. So it's just not the day after the election somebody hands the college a check. There's a process that actually has to be worked through for that too. So
more of a question. I was wondering if, as far as if the bond goes through, prioritizing the projects, would we also be looking at projects that weren't completed in the last bond but were at the list, like the ones at the bottom of the list? Could they go to the top? Thinking about like student service building.
I was thinking that you were thinking that. The new facilities master plan is a new facilities master plan. So some of the things that were on the old list, first let me say that, were either have had their time or we've done other things. Certainly that what was Matt referred to as the infill building, which is the student services area, is a key priority, and we would look to not wait till the end of that. I'm mincing my words, but not really. So we have to prioritize, make sure that people can work, students can be served while we're working on that project. But it is a high priority that's come up in every conversation that I've had across the institution, as a central one-stop, if you will, for student affairs and student services. Yeah, Amira, I'm sorry, thank you.
Okay. So going out in the public, what does that look like through the campaign? Because we see the facilities master plan and we know the college, but to really get the public involved, what is that going to look like?
Once we are clear that we would like to go for a bond, and it's still in the feasibility stage right now, then we will work with the board, we'll draft ballot language. The board has to adopt this resolution. Prior to adopting the resolution, we can have a general series of conversations that aren't campaigning. To do a campaign insider for me to even advocate for the bond is not legal. So I would say it's kind of like what Matt talked about. As we move forward and the board gets ready and it's clear that they want to go this direction with background, I would think that there would be an external campaign committee. And Jessica was very involved in this in 2002. Yeah, campaign manager. So I'm sure the board, the foundation, as you know, if you weren't aware of this, our Napa Valley College Foundation, a separate 501c3 that's external, they've been front and center. They're very pro-bond. They've changed their bylaws and, in fact, their governance structure so they can support the bond monetarily out of the chute. And that was a big step for them. So that means that they can contribute rather than just a limited, few thousands, up to 150,000 towards this, which is they were very, very clear on that. So I would think they would probably take the lead in establishing an outside campaign group, and then individual members of our community, you and whoever it might be, could be active or not active as you saw fit, but just not on work time, those kinds of things. Yeah. Y'all okay? Thank you very much. If you have, obviously, you could email anybody, on the cabinet team, or any leader, any questions, Faye, that academic senate might have, or the administrators or faculty classified, or students. Any students here today? I don't see. I'm making an outreach to students, and Rafael Manzo, the president of the NVC, will be here, I think, next Tuesday, so that will be